My family kicked me out for my sister. Months later, Mom found a beautiful coastal cottage online and booked it for Grandma's birthday. She had no idea who owned it. Hours later, my father was folding my shirts into a cardboard box when I noticed he was using the same hands that taught me to swing a hammer. I don't know why that's the detail I kept, not the box, flat, pulled from the top shelf of my own closet, the kind that printer paper comes in, not my mother in the armchair nodding along like the decision had already been made before I walked in the door, not Mrs. Pwitt from next door sitting by the window pretending she'd stopped by for any reason other than to watch, just my father's hands, the calluses across the palm, the way he folded the sleeve in first, then the body, the same method he'd used when he packed his own bag for job sites when I was 7, efficient, practiced, a man doing a task he has decided needs doing. Your sister needs this house more than you do, Jolene. He said it the way you read a measuring tape, like the number was just the number. My mother looked at me from the armchair with the expression she uses when she's decided something is for my own good and wants me to recognize that. You've always landed on your feet, she said, warm as a heat lamp. You'll be fine. I looked at the box. I looked at Mrs. Pwitt, who was suddenly very interested in the street outside the window. I looked at my sister Brittany, who was standing in the doorway of what was now, apparently, her room, arms crossed, with the expression she has worn since approximately 1998, when she realized that the fastest path between wanting something and having it ran directly through our mother. Who's going to pay my car loan now? She said, to me, with genuine grievance, like I was resigning from a position she'd budgeted for. I picked up the box. I walked out. I pulled the door shut behind me. Not a slam, just the click of a latch. And I sat in my truck in the driveway for 43 seconds because that's how long it took me to decide that crying in front of the house was not something I was going to do. Then I drove 3 hours back to the coast with the box rattling on the passenger seat. And I did math the whole way. Let me tell you what my family thought they knew about me. And then let me tell you what was actually true. My name is Jolene Marsh. I'm 34 years old. I grew up in Mill Haven, Oregon, a medium town about 3 hours from the coast, the kind of place where everyone knows what your father does for a living and forms an opinion about you accordingly. My father, Wayne Marsh, ran a construction crew for 22 years, residential framing mostly. He is competent and careful and taught me more about how buildings work than any class I've ever taken. My mother, Carol, runs the Mill Haven family's emotional economy with the specific expertise of a woman who has never had to run anything else. She is warm in the way that coastal fog is warm, pervasive, softening, and impossible to see clearly through. She has a talent for decisions that benefit her preferred child and a gift for framing those decisions as consensus. Her preferred child is Brittany, 3 years younger than me, currently between jobs in the specific way that Brittany has been between jobs for most of her adult life, not through lack of ability, but through lack of the particular tolerance for difficulty that develops in people who have been told, since childhood, that difficulty is someone else's department. Then there was Cody, Brittany's boyfriend, whose primary contribution to the family ecosystem was a series of business ideas that required startup capital and produced nothing but enthusiasm. My mother funded these ideas. She used resources she didn't have and explained the gap to no one. What my family thought I did, construction. That's it. That's the whole picture they'd assembled. Jolene does construction, something on the coast. She works with buildings. This was technically accurate the way a photograph of one wall is technically accurate about a house. What I actually did, 18 months before my father packed my shirts into a cardboard box, I had registered Coastline Structural Recovery as an LLC in the state of Oregon. We take houses the ocean has been trying to kill and bring them back, salt-eaten siding, rotted joists, foundations that storms have loosened from their footings over 20 years of accumulated argument with the Pacific. We also do coastal flood remediation and historic restoration, the second category being, at the time my parents were handing my bedroom to Brittany, about to become significantly more valuable. We had 6 employees, a project manager named Darnell Kessler, who'd come from a commercial restoration firm in Portland, and who I'd been trying to hire for 2 years before he said yes. An accountant, Teresa Vo, who handled our books with the specific joy of a person who genuinely loves numbers the way some people love music, and 3 crew members I would trust with any structure I cared about, which is the only metric that matters in this line of work. I hadn't told my family any of this because they hadn't asked. Not once in 18 months. Not a single question about the work, the company, the coast, anything. My mother asked occasionally whether I was doing okay in the specific tone that means she's checked the box marked concern and is moving on. My father nodded when I mentioned work and redirected to whatever Brittany was dealing with that week. I let them believe what they'd decided to believe, which is a different thing from lying. The second thing they didn't know about was the beach house. My grandmother, Nana Marsh, my father's mother, Elspeth Marsh, 80 years old on the Saturday that everything came apart, had a house once. It was on the coast, about 2 miles north of where I'd eventually set up my company's yard. A small craftsman cottage built in the 1940s, cedar-sided, with a porch that faced the water and caught the evening light in a way she described, every time she mentioned it, with the specific grief of a person describing a place they don't expect to see again. She'd lost it in the early 1980s when the family went through what she called the hard years, my grandfather's illness, the costs that followed, the kind of financial unraveling that happens to careful people when the wrong things go wrong in the wrong order. anymore. She'd talked about that porch my whole life, not bitterly, just the way you talk about something that was real and then was gone and that you've made your peace with, mostly, except that you haven't. 3 years ago, the property came up at a Lincoln County tax auction. The house had passed through 2 owners since Nana lost it, neither of whom had done much with it. The last owner had let the porch rot into the sand and the siding go to hell and the foundation shift on its footings until the county assessor's report used the phrase significant structural compromise, which in my professional opinion meant I know exactly what to do with this. I emptied my savings account, $47,000, every dollar I'd built in 5 years of coastal work before I'd started the company, and I bought it at auction for $38,500 and change. The remaining $8,500 went to materials for the first phase of work. I rebuilt it every weekend for 3 years, alone mostly, with Darnell helping on the big structural days and owing me a favor in return. New porch framing. Cedar siding I milled to match the original profile from photographs Nana had in a tin box in her closet, which I'd borrowed and scanned without telling her why. Foundation underpinning. New windows in the original 6/6 configuration. A kitchen that worked, a bathroom that worked, 2 bedrooms with the proportions that old houses have when they were built for people rather than square footage. Nobody in my family knew whose name was on the deed. I hadn't decided yet what to do with that information when my father started packing my shirts. The drive back to the coast that night was 3 hours and 14 minutes. I know because I watched the clock from about the 90-minute mark, which is when the coast fog started and the math got clearer. I stopped 2 things from my phone before I crossed the county line. The autopay on my parents' property taxes, $2,740 a year, which I'd been covering quietly for 3 years because my mother had mentioned once that they were tight and I'd simply set it up without discussion, which turned out to be my consistent error in this family. I canceled it in 4 taps. The homeowner's insurance on the Millhaven house, same process, 4 taps. Then Brittany's car loan, the one I'd co-signed 14 months ago because my mother had explained that Brittany needed reliable transportation and her credit wouldn't support the loan alone. And I was the practical one, wasn't I? I understood how these things worked. $387 a month, 14 payments in, canceled. I drove the rest of the way in the particular quiet of someone who has just closed several doors and is listening to the echo. I got home at 11:52 p.m. I put the cardboard box in the corner of my bedroom and I did not unpack it that night because unpacking it would require me to put the shirts somewhere and I wasn't ready to have a conversation with myself about what somewhere meant. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table and I opened my credit report. I opened it because Brittany's "who's going to pay my car loan now" had been sitting in the back of my mind for 3 hours, and there was something in the way she said it, the specificity of it, the assumption of access, that felt like information I should verify. The credit report took 4 minutes to load. The home equity line of credit on the Millhaven property appeared on page 2. $84,000. Opened 14 months ago. Current status, delinquent. My name listed as co-borrower. The Millhaven house as collateral. I read it twice, then I read it a third time because the second time didn't make it make more sense. I had not signed anything 14 months ago. I had not been in Millhaven 14 months ago except for one weekend in March for my cousin's baby shower. I had not sat across from a loan officer and reviewed terms and initialed a disclosure form and put my signature on a line that made me legally responsible for $84,000 secured against my parents' house. My social security number, my old signature. I recognized the description in the document detail. The version of my signature I used until I was about 26 and then changed slightly, as signatures sometimes do. A small evolution that I couldn't have articulated but that I would have recognized. Someone had signed for me. My hands were flat on the table. I was looking at the ceiling. My tea was getting cold. Okay, I said to the empty kitchen. Okay. I called Teresa Vo at 7:30 the next morning. Teresa has been my accountant for 2 years and her primary professional characteristic is that she does not panic. Not because she lacks imagination for what could go wrong, but because she has learned that panic is inefficient, and she is constitutionally opposed to inefficiency. I told her what I'd found. A pause. The precise pause of someone organizing information rather than reacting to it. Send me the full credit report, she said. All 3 bureaus. I'll look at it today. I pulled all 3. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. Sent them to her by 8 a.m. She called back at 10:47. The HELOC is the main item, she said. There's also a personal loan from 14 months ago, $12,000, and 2 credit cards opened in the last 18 months with a combined limit of $8,500. All delinquent. All with your SSN. All with what I'm assuming is not your signature. 49 seconds of silence on my end while I did the math on $84,000 plus $12,000 plus $8,500, $14,500, I said. Before interest and penalties, Teresa said. Yes. I thanked her. I hung up. I called my attorney. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. Marcus Teal has been a small business attorney in Lincoln County for 19 years. He has the specific, unhurried energy of a man who has seen most of what people do to each other in the context of money and property, and has developed a comprehensive system for addressing it without taking it personally. He has handled my business contracts, my company's liability coverage, and 3 years ago, the title work on the beach house. He answered on the second ring. Marcus, I said, I need to file 3 things. Talk to me. Fraud dispute with all 3 credit bureaus. Identity theft after affidavit with the FTC. I'll do that online today. And I need to know what a police report for financial identity theft looks like in Lincoln County. A pause. How much? $104,000, roughly. HELOC secured against my parents' property. My name, my SSN, my old signature. A longer pause. Your parents' property, he said. Not a question. Processing. Yes. Jolene. Another pause. Do you want to pursue this criminally or civilly or both? I want it documented, I said. Every piece of it. I want a file that is so complete that the next person who looks at my credit history understands exactly what happened and exactly who did it. That I can do, he said. Come in Thursday. I said I'd be there. Then I sat at my kitchen table for another few minutes, looking at the fog coming in off the water, thinking about the beach house 2 miles up the road and the conversation I hadn't decided to have yet. Then the email arrived. The email came through my company's booking system. Coastline Structural Recovery had expanded 6 months earlier into a side operation. Coastal vacation rental of historic properties we'd restored, managed through a website my project manager Darnell had insisted we build, because, he said, the properties were good enough to generate income, and income was the point. The email was a vacation rental inquiry. The renter wanted a 3-day weekend in late September for a family event. Approximately 25 guests for a Saturday afternoon gathering, use of the outdoor space and the porch primarily, overnight accommodation for 2. The property requested the Ottercroft Cottage, 2 miles north of Rockaway Beach. Ottercroft was what I'd named the beach house. On the website, it appeared exactly as it was. The cedar siding I'd milled to the original profile, the porch facing the water, the evening light. I'd written the listing description myself, which I'm not entirely proud of from a neutrality standpoint, but which accurately conveyed that the house had been rebuilt from historic materials with attention to its original character. The renter's name in the booking form, Carol Marsh, my mother. She had not recognized the house. She had found it through an algorithm. The website's SEO had apparently landed her in a search for Coastal Cottage, Oregon birthday party venue, and she had looked at the photos of the porch I'd rebuilt from her mother-in-law's memories, and she had thought, lovely, that'll photograph well. She had paid the deposit, 40%, $380, through the website's payment processor, card ending in 44701, which I did not look up but didn't need to. She had booked a party venue for Nana's 80th birthday, in Nana's house, which she did not know was Nana's house, which she did not know was my house. I sat with the email for a long time. The ethical question is the one I want to address directly, because I've asked it of myself more than once. Did I have an obligation to tell her, to call her, explain the situation, give her the chance to understand what she'd found? Here is what I decided. She had packed me out of a house in a cardboard box. She had forged my signature onto a $104,000 debt. She had spent 20 years making decisions about what her daughters deserved and communicating those decisions as settled facts. She wanted a house that photographed well for Nana's birthday. I was going to give her the most accurate photograph she'd ever seen. I confirmed the booking, I prepared the cottage, and I made one more call to Marcus Teal to let him know there was one additional piece of business I wanted handled before the party. A life estate deed, Nana's name across the top, prepared, notarized, ready to be signed. For Elspeth Marsh, I told him, right of occupancy for life. No rent, no conditions, no reversionary interest. Whenever she wants it, it's hers. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That's a good thing to do, he said. I know, I said. She's the only one in that family who ever went down to the bones of something. The Saturday arrived under the specific September light that the Oregon coast produces when it's decided to be beautiful, bright, warm, the fog burned off by 10, the water flat and silver in the way that makes you understand why people have been building houses facing it for 100 years. I arrived at Ottercroft at 8 in the morning. I set up the outdoor tables the way my mother had specified in her event notes, which she'd sent through the booking platform, with the thoroughness of a woman who has been planning parties her whole life and considers logistics a form of love. White tablecloths, flower arrangements from a florist in Tillamook, a table near the porch for the cake. At 1:30 p.m., the first cars arrived. Cousins I recognized. Church friends of my mother's I knew by face, if not name. An aunt from Grants Pass who always smelled like cedar chips and bergamot, and who found me near the porch and hugged me before she understood the situation, which I appreciated. At 1:47 p.m., my mother's car pulled up the gravel path. She came up the walk in her good dress, the blue one she wore to things she wanted to feel significant, already in hostess mode, one hand raised in greeting to the cousins, her voice pitched to carry across the lawn. Isn't it lovely, Mama? I found it for you. Nothing but the best. Nana came up the path behind her in her good cardigan, the one with the embroidered collar that she wore to church and to things that mattered. She was using the cane she'd gotten last year, moving carefully on the gravel, and my cousin Drew had his hand lightly at her elbow. My mother was already gathering people around her, already beginning the performance of the woman who had found this wonderful venue and planned this wonderful party. 3 months of work, nothing but the best. Nana looked up at the house. She stopped walking. Her free hand came up to her mouth. Wayne, she said. She reached back and found my father's arm without looking at him. Wayne, this is my house. My father looked at the house, then at my mother, then at me, where I was standing at the edge of the lawn near the garden gate. His face did something I had not seen it do before, a kind of inventory, rapid and private, counting things he hadn't added up before. My mother heard what Nana said and pivoted smoothly. Oh, Mama, it does look a little like the old pictures, doesn't it? Isn't that funny? And began to redirect the attention attention of the assembled cousins back toward her, toward the table, toward the party she had built. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. I walked onto the lawn. Mom, she turned. The smile held for approximately 1 second. The kind of smile that is maintained by structure rather than by feeling, that stays up as long as the performance requires it and comes down the moment the audience produces an unexpected cue. I was the unexpected cue. The company you booked through, I said. I kept my voice even, the way I keep my voice even on job sites when I'm explaining a structural problem to a client who doesn't want to hear it. Coastline Structural Recovery. That's mine. I started it 18 months ago. This house is mine. I bought it at county auction 3 years ago, and I've been rebuilding it every weekend since. I watched the math happen on her face. I found it, I said, in the auction listings. I recognized the address. You'd written it down once, years ago, when Nana was telling the story about the hard years. I had the address. I had my savings. And I had a good idea of what was wrong with the structure. Nana was very still. My mother's smile had fully disengaged. What was underneath it was the expression I had seen only a few times in my life. Not anger, not grief, but the specific quality of a person whose understanding of a situation is being revised faster than their composure can compensate for. You hid this. Her voice had the edge that comes into it when she's recalibrating into grievance. After everything we did for you, you hid a whole house, a whole business. You packed me out in a cardboard box, I said, in front of Mrs. Pewitt, while Dad used the hands that taught me to build things to fold my shirts into a printer paper box. Silence on the lawn, 23 people finding sudden interest in the middle distance. You've always landed on your feet, she started. I know you believe that, I said. I'm going to let you keep believing it, but I'm not doing this part of the conversation right now. I turned away from her. I walked to Nana. I crouched down in front of her chair. Someone had placed a chair for her near the porch, which was the right instinct, and I opened the folder I'd been carrying. Nana, I held out the document. This is a life estate deed. Your name across the top. Elspeth Marie Marsh. It means you live here for the rest of your life. No rent, no conditions. Nobody can sell it out from under you or tell you to leave or change the terms. The porch is yours. The sunset off that porch is yours. She looked at the document. At her name, printed in the careful way that legal documents print names. The tin, she said. I knew what she meant. I found it, I said. When I took the house down to the bones, inside the east wall, in a recess behind the insulation, a tin box. Letters, photographs, a page from a notebook with the address written in your handwriting. She pressed her hand over her mouth. I went down to the bones of it, Nana, same way you always did for me. She made a sound that I will not describe because I don't have the right words for it. Not crying exactly, not laughing. The sound of a person receiving something they had genuinely stopped expecting. She pressed the deed to her chest. My mother tried one more time. The only coin she had left, the one she'd been spending my whole life. You've always landed on your feet, Jolene. Quieter now, aimed at me over Nana's head. You can handle this. You always handle things. We can't. I looked at her. I did land on my feet, I said. Right here, on this porch. The one you told me my sister needed more than I did. The lawn was very quiet, and then Nana looked up. She found her daughter, my mother Carol, who had planned this party in a house she didn't know was her mother's, in a venue she'd booked from the daughter she'd packed out in a cardboard box, and she looked at her with the clear, settled gaze of a woman who has been watching things for 80 years and has made her peace with most of them, but not this. Carol, she said, thin, but clear enough for every cousin to hear it. Hush. The girl gave me my porch back. The documentation matters, so I want to tell you how it resolved. Marcus Teal filed the fraud dispute with all 3 credit bureaus on a Thursday afternoon in October. The identity theft affidavit went to the FTC the same day. The police report was filed with the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office on a Friday morning. Detective Renee Salazar, 15 years in financial crimes, who took my documentation with the specific careful attention of someone who has seen this exact pattern before and knows what it means. I want to be clear about something, Detective Salazar said during our second meeting. The signature forgery on a secured loan is a felony in Oregon. The HELOC, given the amount, is also a felony. The credit cards are potentially additional counts. Are you prepared for what pursuing this fully looks like? I told her I was. I told her I had the original loan documents, which Marcus had subpoenaed from the lender. I told her I had my old signature samples going back 12 years, enough for a handwriting analysis. I told her that Teresa Vo had assembled a complete financial document package that was currently sitting in Marcus's office in 2 labeled binders. Detective Salazar looked at the binders. You were a CFO at some point, she said. I'm the CEO, I said. I do my own documentation. The credit bureaus removed all 4 fraudulent accounts from my report within 60 days. The lender, upon receiving the fraud documentation and the police report number, began its own investigation into the loan origination. My parents received a certified letter from the lender in November. I know because my father called me the first call in 6 weeks and told me about it in the quiet voice of a man who is putting things together. He didn't ask me to make it stop. I don't know if that's growth or just exhaustion. I've decided it doesn't matter right now. 6 months later, Nana is on the porch most evenings when the weather allows. She has a specific chair, an Adirondack, painted the dark green she told me she remembered from the original porch, which I matched from a chip of old paint I found under the floorboards during the rebuild. She has a blanket she keeps there. She watches the water. She called me last week on a Tuesday at 6:14 p.m. I know the time because I was in the middle of a job site call that I stepped away from when I saw her name. The light tonight, she said. Jolene. seen. You should see it. I told her I'd come up Sunday. I drove up Sunday morning and sat on the porch with her for 2 hours while the fog came in and then burned off, and the water went from gray to silver to the particular blue that the coast produces on good October mornings. She told me a story about the original porch, a summer in 1962, a neighbor's dog, a specific evening that she'd written about in the notebook I'd found in the tin box in the east wall. I know the story from the notebook. I let her tell it anyway. Coastline Structural Recovery is up to 11 employees now. We took on 2 new historic restoration contracts in the spring, and Darnell has been talking about opening a second yard in Astoria, which I'm considering with the specific caution that I apply to things that matter. Teresa Vo sent me the Q3 financials last week with a note at the bottom that said, "Solid quarter. You should eat something. I am fine. I did land on my feet. I just didn't tell anyone where they were."